How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendon and Sterling back with you. Obviously, we had a week off last week. Not really to, either of our planning to take that week off. It was just schedules. They just didn't necessarily work out the best way possible. But we are back. We are ready to go. And first official week of preseason, so we can realistically now say football is back, even though it is preseason. We talked about the Hall of Fame game last time, but now every single team has played a game, and man, it's good to wake up on a Saturday and Sunday and be like, I got football to watch. It's such a great feeling.
Yeah, it's nice to finally have it back. I mean, you know my thoughts on preseason. I never get super excited about it, and honestly, my team's games have been at times when I'm not able to watch anyway. So most of what I've been seeing is clips, highlights, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But it is nice to finally have football back, and we're 2 weeks away from the regular season kicking off. I'm much more
September
excited
10th.
about that.
September 10th, the Lions versus the Chiefs. To me, the first game of the season, always on the Thursday night, is always the Super Bowl champion versus
Hmm.
a team that the NFL deems is going to be kind of. They always kind of try to set this up like it's a Super Bowl preview. Because last year it was the Rams versus the Bills, and it was
Yeah.
like, okay, like that's a good matchup. These are two teams. The Rams obviously just coming off of a Super Bowl. Bills are one of those teams where it's like they are without a doubt a Super Bowl contender, or so we thought. I realistically thought it should have been Rams versus Bengals just to kind of have that rematch almost. I kind of almost wish that the first game of the season would be a rematch between the two teams that were previously in the Super Bowl.
I I think the NFL just tries to avoid that because we've seen some of these dominant dynasties in the last 2 decades where sometimes we have a back-to-back Super Bowl of the same two teams. And so I think the NFL is more like, well, no, if they were there last year, maybe they'll get there again this year. We don't want to spoil it in week one, game one of, oh, this is what the Super Bowl will look like this year. I think it's more they want to give an up and coming team that shot to prove themselves and go, hey, can you beat the Super Bowl hangover team? You
Yeah,
know? And was were the Lions the source of Hard Knocks last year, or was that the year before?
they were Hard Knocks last year. Yeah,
Last year. So I wonder if maybe that's what it was. Is the NFL was like, oh, we talked about the Lions all last year. We had them on Hard Knocks. We're gonna give them the shot and let them play the Chiefs in week one.
yeah, and for me, I just kind of look at that and I go, I understand obviously wanting to give a team that is an up and comer, but again, I'm not going to say this as a biased Bears fan, but it's going to be the Lions haven't proved anything yet. Like to me, like the Bills for instance, like that's a
Hmm.
game where it's like this is a team that over the last few years has just been constantly dominant. The Lions, when was the last time they made the playoffs? And when was the last time they won a playoff game? And yes, at the end of the year they looked phenomenal,
Hmm.
but like it's still the Lions we're talking about here. Like they need to actually I think both you and I are watching this game going, okay, so it's gonna be Kansas City by 20. Cool, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
good opening week, guys. Yeah, just giving Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs the easiest, or not the easiest possible week one matchup, but it's like, okay, here you go,
Uh,
Casey.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Thursday night football anyway because my work shift results in me rarely getting to watch Thursday night football unless I book the day off.
Yeah,
And so I won't even see that season opener myself. But I mean, I look at it and like, yeah, last year you had the Bills, you could have had the Bengals. There were a couple other teams you might have been able to slot in there, even something like the Dolphins who were coming up and stuff like that. You look at the NFC for a team that you want to put up against the Chiefs. Who else do you pick? Like, because you don't want the Eagles, you don't want that Super Bowl rematch or that potential Super Bowl preview.
well, you could do the
So who,
49ers, the Seahawks.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I like I'm fine with where the 49ers are. I would rather the 49ers be coming into Acrisure Stadium and playing my Steelers than playing the Chiefs.
Yeah, the 49ers typically have always struggled first few weeks of the season. Obviously, last year was kind of a weird exception because it was the Monsoon Bowl that my
Yep.
Chicago Bears won. But it's still one of those things where, again, even the 49ers a little bit struggle. But this
Hmm.
year, I would say out of all the years for the 49ers, I would say this is probably going to be one of the most dangerous years that the 49ers are going to be out there because they know who their quarterback is going to be. Last year it was okay, it's Trey Lance's year, but they still had Jimmy Garoppolo. They reworked his contract. They did all this in the offseason. And yeah, we went into week one and it was like, okay, Trey Lance is the guy. Is he the guy? Like,
Well, he
is.
got hurt. He was the guy until that injury.
No, I got. No, for sure. But it was one of
Yeah.
those things where you kind of looked at Trey Lance and you said, this is a Super Bowl caliber team. He's essentially a rookie going in. How quick do the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, like, how long of rope does Trey Lance have? And that was the kind of feeling going into the year last year, where it was, okay, like, we have a young player who is good, or that we hope is good, but we also have this Super Bowl caliber quarterback, a guy that's brought us to a Super Bowl. Is he the greatest quarterback in the NFL? No, not by a long shot, but he's consistent with the team, and
Hmm.
but this year Shanahan has come out and said Brock Purdy would literally have to melt to lose the starting job. And to me, they weren't saying that about Trey Lance last year. They weren't saying that
No.
about Jimmy Garoppolo the year before. Like, this is the most confident that this team has been with their starting quarterback going into the regular season, and what has felt like a very, very long time, maybe even all the way back to the Colin Kaepernick years.
Yeah. Definitely. I I think the Niners, they're either gonna be one of these hot or cold teams, because yeah, like they've said, Brock Purdy's our guy going forward, but like you got to remember he was Mr. Irrelevant, and out of all the quarterbacks that were drafted last year, I really do feel like Brock Purdy is the most likely to have a significant drop in his play quality this year compared to anybody else that was drafted last year. And so that is definitely a concern. Granted, this is a Mike Shanahan offense who he builds so that he doesn't need a superstar quarterback. So he does have that game plan and that team in place where anybody could come in there and win. The question is just, is Brock Purdy going to be able to maintain that surprise level of play that he had last year? Or are teams going to go, well, no, this guy was picked last in the draft. We can't let him upstage us every week like he was doing at the end of the season last year.
Yeah, with Kyle Shanahan and the way that he runs his offense, it is so unbelievably quarterback friendly. But
Hmm.
you just look at what Brock Purdy was coming out of school. Obviously, he went to Iowa State, which isn't a big grandioso type school. It's not the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Notre Dames, the Ohio States. I could keep going on a list
Hmm.
of different teams, and so that was a factor in why he was picked so far backwards, but you just looked at his stats and the way that he played at Iowa, and he was just a phenomenal quarterback. Obviously a little bit undersized for the position. He's not the 6'3", 230 pound. I'm pretty sure he's 6 foot, maybe 210 pounds. So he's not small by any means. He's my size. Obviously,
Hmm.
I'm 6 foot, not 210 pounds. Wish I was, but different story. But this is a guy that has the right running back, obviously with Christian McCaffrey there. Like we always like to talk about the running back market, and I believe we did talk about this last time. Christian McCaffrey is one of those guys where you just go like, man, when he's out there, he's just such a game changer, and in this system, he's so good. But then you
Hmm.
have Debo Samuel, you have your flurry of other wide receivers in that system. You have George Kittle going out there being arguably one of the best run tight ends and best pass catching tight ends, just mashed into one currently in the NFL. And you just kind of look at that team and go, their defense is so unbelievable that it just kind of feels like this
Hmm.
cocktail that is just, okay, here we go.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this 49ers team on paper is the second best team in the NFC. Hands down. Like there's no even debate about it in my mind that Eagles are number one, Niners are number two. Beyond that, it's up in the air who's going to do what in that conference.
It really is, and
But
I don't know if
the,
this is necessarily a hot take, but I think I think the Eagles and the 49ers not only just have the best rosters in the NFC, but I think they might have the best rosters in the NFL. Because if you just look at those two teams, like last year we went into the Super Bowl, and who did we say had the better roster? It was the Eagles. But
yeah.
who had the better quarterback, the better head coach, and we're like, okay, we know who it is, so we're gonna give the advantage over there. But the reason that game was so close is because of how good those teams were,
Hmm.
or how good
Yeah,
they
I
were.
mean, the tough thing with the 49ers still is, though, there are a lot of red flags in terms of uh, injuries. Like they've got a lot of guys there that, Brock Purdy's coming back from surgery. Christian McCaffrey hasn't played a whole lot of complete seasons. He does have injury issues in the past. Like you said, when he's on the field, he's one of the best running backs in the league. The question is, can he stay on the field?
Yeah,
And so that's my only concern with the Niners, where that depth. Once they start getting some of those big hits and start maybe suffering some of those minor injuries, do they turn into bigger injuries? Do they snowball on the team, and do they start to fall apart and crumble? Because they don't have that depth at quarterback this year like they did last year. Sure, they've got Trey Lance, but Trey Lance did not look great against that Raiders, second team, which is not a good thing. And I still don't really have faith in Sam Darnold. He wasn't great in New York. He wasn't great in Carolina. I don't think he's the guy. I think he's going to be one of these career backups throughout the
yeah.
league.
I have more faith in Sam Darnell than I do Trey Lance, because I watched Trey Lance in that game against the Raiders, and you're just looking at it going like, Trey Lance might be one of the worst draft picks in recent memory, because of what the 49ers gave up. Because if you
Yeah.
and just at the quarterbacks that came after, and you look at it, go, that year it was okay. It was Trevor Lawrence, you had Justin Fields, you had Zach Wilson, you had Mac Jones, then you had Trey Lance, and it was okay. Everyone knew that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number one overall pick. That was rightfully so. And then throughout the entirety of that year, it was Justin Fields as the number two guy. And
Hmm.
just out of random, like Zach Wilson during one of these off-field workouts, like the pro day, makes a throw, and it's okay, it's Zach Wilson, and then Justin Fields apparently just went back to nowhere. Like everyone was like, he's not that good of a quarterback. It was like last week you said he might be rivaling Trevor Lawrence to be the number one pick, like, and now he's fucking nothing.
Yeah.
And for what the 49ers gave up, the 3 first-round picks to move up there and go get this guy, that's why I'm saying he could possibly be one of the worst picks in recent memory, just because you look at the, if Justin Fields was on the 49ers, they win the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, if Trey Lance doesn't go down with that injury, the 49ers might win the Super Bowl last year. Like I know you're shitting on him, and like I'm not a huge fan of the guy. I agree the 49ers way overpaid to go up and get him in that draft. But he has skill, he has talent. What I was seeing in that game against the Raiders, yes, he looked bad, but he looked timid, he looked scared, he looked nervous, which is fair. We saw the same thing from Dak Prescott. We saw the same thing from Lamar Jackson when they came back from those bad ankle injuries they had. Because that's just it. As a mobile quarterback, that ankle injury is a bad injury to have. And it makes you nervous. It makes it tough to set your feet properly and still have that same bounce and mobility in your game, especially first game back. Like I don't blame him for looking that way. He definitely has many strides to make in order to get, some of that value back so the 49ers can trade him somewhere and get something decent back for him. But we saw Dak Prescott bounce back from it. We saw Lamar Jackson. Granted, they were further along in their careers. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Trey Lance yet. I think with some time and building that confidence back up, he does have the potential to still be a starter in this league.
the one reason why I am more inclined to be in the position of what I was saying beforehand is with those guys that you talked about, the Dak Prescotts, the Jalen Hurts, the Lamar Jacksons, they played a ton in college.
Hmm.
And you look at Trey Lance, he played 11 games in college at North Dakota State. So, granted, he was playing for the Alabama of, Division 2, but played 11 games. And when you look at his body of work from the time that he got drafted, he played one game the year that he was drafted.
Yeah.
And he is going into year 3, and he has played, or he has started in, I don't even think it's been more than 3 games that he's actually started. And you
Hmm.
just kind of look at that and go, okay, over the last 5 years, technically, the dude has played in 15 games. And we always talk about, when it comes to developing a quarterback, the best thing for them to do is to play. Because
In
you're,
most cases, yes.
yeah,
But we've seen those ones where it works out to not have them play. Look at Patrick Mahomes. I, I know it's a rare thing, but if you're looking at examples of players that they go, we're going to draft you, we're going to sit you, and then we're going to play you, and he becomes a superstar, arguably the best quarterback in the league at this moment.
oh, possibly
Like,
the greatest quarterback ever.
exactly. And so, like, there is argument to be made that, drafting a young guy who shows those flashes and go, okay, we're going to coach him up to the NFL level before we put him in. Who knows, maybe the Niners sit on Trey Lance as at this point with the value they're going to get back for him. I think they should. You
Well,
sit
I just don't
with
see any
him.
team actually trading for him.
Well, not prior to an injury. Once we see some injuries come down in the first few weeks, then some of that value will come. But honestly, if they're not going to, and I don't think they will get this, if they can't get a first round pick back for him, then I think they should keep him. Because you sit him, you let him recover that ankle, you keep him practicing, you build that confidence back up, and then if Brock Purdy starts to stumble, because again, there's not a whole lot of proof that Brock Purdy is going to be this next Messiah. We don't know that he's going to be a great quarterback for years to come. You've got 2 young guys there. You can ride out these rookie contracts because Trey Lance has another year left on his contract, and then I believe an option at the end of that.
Would they have to pick up his option at the end of this year? Because at the
Yeah.
end of year number 3, you have the option to pick up the
Mhm.
5th year, and
Which honestly, I like if he's still looking decent, and really the only issue I saw, as I said, was that timid, that worried, almost car-like feeling where it was like,
running
oh,
and
I don't want
shitting
to
in
get
his
hit,
pants.
I don't want to take this, I'm going to get rid of it. If you can get that out of him, which I think they can, Kyle Shanahan, if any coach is going to be able to work with a quarterback and bring his calmness down, it's going to be him. I I think this is the best possible thing for the Niners is just keep Trey Lance there as your backup if something happens. I mean, Brock Purdy's injury was that throwing arm.
Yep.
All it's going to take is one D
Bad
lineman
hit.
coming in and hitting his arm on his helmet, and all of a sudden Purdy's gone for the year. You've already traded Trey Lance away, and you're going, what do we do? We've got this Super Bowl ready team, and now we don't have any quarterback, and we're gonna have to go out and trade away draft picks again just to get a Mitch Trubisky or something like that. And no team wants to do that when you've got a guy like Trey Lance. I just think the Niners, it's good that they're shopping around, but I don't think they need to pull the trigger on it, much like last year was with Jimmy Garoppolo. Everybody was like, oh, they got to trade him by the start of the season. They didn't. It worked out in their advantage because Trey Lance went down, and I'm sure the Niners front office was like, oh, thank God we didn't trade Jimmy G. We still got a quarterback. The panic set in when Garoppolo went down, and they're like, "Oh, now we got to put in this kid Brock Purdy. I hope this is
Mr.
okay."
Irrelevant, last pick in the
Right?
draft. No, no, I and like you and I, we talked about this at nauseum last year, where it was
Hmm.
like everyone, including myself, was saying that you have to trade Garoppolo away and the reason that we were saying that is because you have this young quarterback going into his second year. You need to give him that confidence that you have full trust in him to go out there and, if he might have some growing pains, which were gonna happen regardless, that he
Hmm.
just doesn't have that short leash, and the guys in the locker room going like, okay, like he made a few boo-boos here in this game that cost us the game. We have this guy that we know that we can win with. That's why a lot of people were saying that last year, and it just so happened that Trey Lance gets injured week 2, Garoppolo
Hmm.
comes in, plays, and it was like, okay, like it worked out for him for sure. I don't think the 49ers are going to trade away Trey Lance. I think a lot of the rumors that we've been seeing on that, and there haven't been a ton of rumors on that. There's been maybe like the sprinkling of here and there.
Hmm.
I don't think they will, just because they saw what happened last year and they know that Purdy has that elbow injury on his throwing hand and Sam
Yeah.
Darnell. But I think, for instance, if Brock Purdy does go down, it's not the Trey Lance show.
No.
I think 100% they're going with Sam Darnold.
Oh, I agree 100%. But, devil's advocate, Brock Purdy goes down week 2. They bring in Sam Darnold, and they lose 4 games in a row.
Yep.
I think at that point you go, you know what? Let's give Trey Lance this shot. We've spent all that money on him, all those draft picks.
You got to give him the opportunity.
Let's give him the try.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's the best solution for this team. Like they've got to go into this season talking about team cohesion.
Yep.
Looking at it going, hey, you guys, like, yeah, most of these teams have a superstar quarterback. That's how they get to where they were. Look at us last year. We went through so many quarterbacks. We went through injuries. We still pulled together as a team. And honestly, I think Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, both having injuries last year and being young quarterbacks, they can feed on each other and pull each other up. And Sam Darnold having such a struggle through the early portions of his career, he's almost the veteran of this quarterback room,
He
which is
really
a
is. Yeah.
scary thought, you know. Uh, and I just think this could be a good thing for Kyle Shanahan. He could be looking at this and going, if these guys can cooperate and not get in each other's way, we could have multiple superstar quarterbacks on our roster that, sure, when the time comes to renegotiate these contracts, we're going to have to pick one, but that's still 2 years out. We've got 2 years if we pick up Trey Lance's option where we can play with this and figure out which guy we want to go with for the next 10 years. And then we still have another great guy that we're going to be able to trade away for a couple second round picks. If
Yep.
he's good enough, maybe a first round pick. I mean, Brock Purdy, really, if you get a third round pick for him at some point, that's still an upgrade over the final pick in the draft that you spent on him.
No, the
You
the
know?
draft value right there, you are instantly winning if that case. But I'm just gonna go back to that old phrase. I forget which coach said it, but it was a guy who he just went out and said, he's like, listen, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. And I listen to that and I go, it is so true, because if you have two
Hmm.
guys vying for the position, do you really have a quarterback? I look back at
Well,
a few years ago with Trubisky and Foles, where it was like
yeah.
the entire season, as soon as that trade was made for Nick Foles, it was okay. The question was, it's not when is Nick Foles gonna play, or it's not if Nick Foles is
It,
gonna play, it's when.
yeah. Yeah.
And
And I agree. Those are the problems. When you've got two guys and you're like, oh, I don't know which one's going to be the starter. The Niners don't have that problem.
yep.
Brock Purdy is the guy. Sam Darnold's the number 2. Trey Lance is the number 3. And they can build Trey Lance up. Next year, this will be more of a problem for them if Trey Lance stays with the team and he starts looking better. Granted, my Steelers had the same problem last year. That, oh, is it Trubisky? Is it Rudolph? Is it Pickett? This year, we don't have that issue. It's Pickett. Trubisky, Rudolph are the number 2, number 3. It hands down. There's no question mark there. And that's I think what that real uh, statement truly was if you've got two guys fighting for the position, then you have no guys. But if you've got your guy and then you still have a great quarterback who's in that number 2, that's not going to hurt your team.
No,
All that
it's
does is
not.
really give you that depth. and that ability if the guy gets hurt to go down. It's when we talk about that short leash and it's like, oh, if you go out there and you lose 2 or 3 games, then we're putting this guy in. That's when you start to run into those problems like my Steelers had last year with Trubisky. They were like, oh, you got a short leash, Pickett's right there waiting. This year, there isn't those issues with the Niners. I don't have those issues in Pittsburgh. There are a few teams that are going to be going through those types of growing pains, but I don't think the Niners have that problem.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's just such a weird situation that they're in. And obviously, it's going to be more of a problem next year. If Brock
Yes.
Purdy goes out there and balls this year, then it's like, okay, Sam Darnold, like it's going to be one of you two guys. Honestly, if Brock Purdy goes out and balls this year, Trey Lance can't be around the team. Like he can't be on the team anymore. And just simply because it's like, yeah, going back to what you're saying, like it's great to have that depth and backup, but you just got to at some point save face. And we did talk about this a little bit last time that we were on, is that the 49ers could be probably the only team in the NFL right now that trades as much as they did to go up and get a guy who wasn't even considered the best guy still available at that point at that position, and to only have a year later draft a guy literally with the last pick in the draft and go, actually, we're going to go with this guy instead of the guy that we gave up hell and heaven and everything else to go get. And everyone was
Hmm.
just kind of like, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yep. Oh, I agree. I mean, me going into it next year, like if Brock Purdy balls out this year, I still keep Trey Lance on that team and I let Sam Darnold go myself. Because at that point, you've then got that extra year with Trey Lance. You showcase him through your training camp at that point with the intention of getting a trade done, is what you do. But I don't have the belief that Brock Purdy is going to come in and ball out this year. I think he is going to have the biggest sophomore slump of all the sophomore quarterbacks in the league that we have this year.
It's going to be incredibly interesting to see. And obviously, if Brock Purdy does have that large sophomore slump, then like what do the 49ers do? Because then they're a Super Bowl caliber team that they
Hmm.
can't really afford to have a quarterback playing bad. So
Um,
it's gonna be really interesting to see.
I mean, their division. I think they'd be okay. Even if Brock Purdy struggles, if they can pull out 10 wins, I think they still make the playoffs.
Oh, without a doubt, they're gonna make
You
the
know,
playoffs if they get 10
exactly.
wins. Yeah.
And so I still think that barring injury, Brock Purdy is their guy. They're gonna let him go through these growing pains. Because Kyle Shanahan is smart. He realizes that they caught lightning in a bottle last year with him. You bring a guy in who nobody knows anything about, and he just shocks the league. They're not going to have that much ease this year, especially in the first few weeks of their schedule. They've got a few very tough games, and so he's going to be tested early. I think he's going to struggle, but ultimately the Niners are still going to make the playoffs. If he stays healthy, he's still going to be their quarterback to there. I don't know if they go as far in the playoffs this year, and that's where I believe they will start to have their struggles next season at that quarterback position. Those question marks of, okay, we have a Super Bowl caliber team. Brock Purdy wasn't good enough to get us there. Do we roll with him still, or do we go back to the guy that we sold the future for? You
Totally,
know,
totally. And again, mark this off on the bingo card, but we went off on one of our ADHD tangents where we started off on a topic and then just, I don't even know where we started with this. We were talking about preseason. We talked about Trey Lance and his horrible performance against the Raiders. You saw that touchdown that should have been a pick, right? Where he
yeah,
threw it to a Raiders defender,
yeah,
literally bobbled it in his hands and basically was just like, here you go, sir, have this free touchdown. And in what is quite possibly the most bizarre touchdown I have ever seen, that only comparing to the Marcus Mariota where he's running, throws it
mhm,
out of defender's hands, gets it right in his hands back, and he's just like, I'm just gonna walk this in. The first time that we've ever had someone throw themselves their own touchdown, be the
right.
thrower and the reception of the touchdown on that particular play.
I mean, I'm sure your old man hates to hear it, but it was a very Raiders-esque play.
Oh,
It
a
felt very
hundred.
Raiders, didn't it?
And you want to know the funniest part
Like
about that?
hot potato.
The guy that dropped that interception and basically handed it to that guy, former Chicago Bear. So I as soon as I saw the name, I was like, yep. I was like,
No.
yep. And of course, him being on the Raiders, I'm like, makes sense to me.
No.
But
But yeah, I mean, I know how we got to where we did. You know, we were talking about week one and we were talking about teams that could have been better picks to play against the Chiefs for week one
that's
from the
what it
NFC.
was.
And, you know, then we got into what the 49ers are looking at this year. And, you know, they're one of the most talked about teams this offseason, and for good reason. They have a great team and a couple of question marks that could result in them having a very tanked season. You know, they feel like they could be what the Cardinals were 2 seasons ago, where you know everybody was talking about how great they were and they looked so great, and then they fell apart. You
Yep.
know, and I feel like the 49ers, as good as they are, there's that potential there just because of those couple of question marks and those couple of red flags.
Yeah, for sure. But moving forward to some of our teams, obviously, um, let's start with your Pittsburgh Steelers. Who did they end up going up against week one in the preseason? I'm not remembering fully
We
on
played the Bucks.
the Bucks, and
Yeah,
obviously,
and they looked good.
yep,
You know, I mean, again, preseason, it's always questionable. The thing I hate about preseason is there's so many players on these teams that they almost know they're not going to make the team. So you watch plays unfold, and half the players stop partway through the play. They don't finish out the play. They don't run for the tackle. You know, and so some of these touchdowns that happen, some of these big plays that happen, you're looking and you're like, well, if that guy hadn't given up on the play,
it would
then
have been
he
a
might have
different
made that
story.
tackle. You know, and so
You and
it
I
is
have a
question mark.
very similar. I believe we have a very similar outlook on the preseason. Of you and I both look at it and go, this it should, or at least in my opinion, preseason, unless my starter
Mhm.
is a rookie, I don't want to see him. I want to see him on the bench for those 3 games. And like when Matt Eberflus announced this week for the Chicago Bears that Justin Fields and a bunch of select starters wouldn't be playing this week against the Colts, I was like, hallelujah, no. And when he announced that, the week prior to that Fields and a bunch of the starters were playing against the Titans, I was enraged. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to see Fields out there. I don't want to see DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney. I don't want to see any of my starters out unless they are a rookie. To me, I'm
Fair.
just I
I'll extend it to slightly beyond just a rookie, though. You know, like I'm looking at Pittsburgh, and yes, last week against the Bucks, you know, 1 or 2 drives for Kenny Pickett. That's all we need to see. That's fine. This week, however, you know, I have heard talks that the Bills are planning on playing Josh Allen for a significant chunk of the game, which we play against them. Which Mike Tomlin responded with, "Yes, we are going to be playing Kenny Pickett as much as Josh Allen plays," which is perfect. You know, so if they both play the first half, then I'm okay with that because Kenny Pickett's still young enough. We're still working out that chemistry with George Pickens, with lots of guys. You know, Washington. You know, Fryermuth has some work to do still. So I don't have as much of a problem with some of these young guys playing a few extra drives in preseason right now. I don't want to see them play the whole game, obviously, you know, and I don't want to see them playing in the second half. I only really want to see them in the first quarter, maybe a bit of the second quarter at the most. You know, granted, I'm not going to be seeing this game this week either, so it'll be clips and highlights that I'll get to see. Um, but yeah, I do agree. It should be mostly your rookies playing, but your first years and your second years also should be getting significant reps unless they showed last year that they are a superstar player. You know, you
yeah.
want to get them warmed up. You want them to get a few hits. The catch is just making sure that they're still playing against the team one on the team you're playing against. You don't want second, third, fourth stringers out there tackling your quarterback or your receivers. That's how injuries happen. You want the starters on the other team to be playing against your starters. And it sounds like this week that's sort of what the Bills and the Steelers have almost worked out together, that they're like, yeah, we'll play our starters, you play your starters, we can get our guys a little bit of juice, and then we'll go to our second teams.
Yeah, for me, I just look at that whole, he's our starter situation, and even like I've just always of the opinion, and again, people will like, I know me and my old man, we've had this debate all preseason long so far this year,
Mm-hmm.
where for me, I look at it, I go, the risk of injury in the preseason is just too damn high for me to look at one of my starters and say, because again, like no matter what offense you put out there, like the Bills, they're saying they're going to play their starters. Not every single starter is going to be out there, and
No.
there's going to be guys that are out there trying to prove they're better than maybe what they're worth necessarily
Mm-hmm.
at the moment. They try to get overzealous, and that's when you see injuries happen. And for me, I go, the Bears just acquired DJ Moore.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be the savior of our offense. And we saw literally his first rep as a Chicago Bear. He gets the ball in his hands. He's like, zoom, I'm going to score a touchdown here real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chicago, get used to this. That's something that I'll talk a little bit more about later. But for me, I look at that and I go, let's just say that, that play gets where you have a safety that's just really going at it. He's like, I'm trying to make the team. I'm just trying to show this. And he just goes for a little bit low and he takes out DJ Moore's knees. I look at that and I go, well, guess what? That's just a fucking waste of a situation, because it's just not something, because it's not one of those things that you're gonna see in a regular
Mm-hmm.
season game. Like, granted, you are gonna see it, but you're gonna see it a lot less. And I just get so worried.
It's tough, because
Yeah, I get worried, man, and I go and for me, I basically sat the second that preseason started, that again in that Titans game, I said I don't want to see Fields get touched. I don't want to see him get
Mhm.
slapped. I don't want to see him on the ground. I don't want to see a Titans player walking up to him after the play, slapping him on the ass, saying, "That was a good play, man. Like, great job working up." I don't want to see that, because every single player in the NFL, they have a hit counter. It's just their body is like, okay, I can realistically take this many hits this year before the body starts to get altered in a different way. I saw Justin Fields get hit a lot last year.
Yeah.
Whether it was a sack, whether he was on the ground after the play, whether it was a cheap shot after he was sliding, I saw way too much of that last year. And for the
Mhm.
team that gave up the most amount of sacks last season, to add two new pieces to that in Nate Davis and Darnell Wright, I'm like, fuck yeah, the offensive line is going to be better. But we still have three guys that were starters last year on this line that were part of that line that was the worst in football. It's kind of one of those
Mhm.
things where I'm like, okay, I'm a lot happier with the line, and I think it's going to be a lot better. But for the love of fuck, this is the best quarterback that this franchise has seen in, I don't even know, like in generations. In generations that I can't I couldn't stomach watching him get hurt in preseason.
I get where you're coming from. None of us want to see our guys go down in preseason, and granted, yeah, DJ Moore, like, I understand having him out there for a series or two, just so that the coaches can see him, so that everybody can gel a little bit. You see the big play, and then you go, okay, yeah, you're sitting until regular season. I feel the same way about Deontay Johnson. Johnson should not be playing any significant amount of snaps in the preseason because he is the veteran that is proven on the team. But I look at it and, like, with your guys, with Justin Fields, you want to get a little bit of that chemistry going before week one. Otherwise, we've seen it. The teams that never start their quarterback unless it's Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, there's all that rust, and inevitably they go 0-1 to start the season. Which granted, 0-1's not the end of the world, but it feels so much better winning week one.
No, I
You
agree,
know,
and
and
I go ahead.
I just look at it for my guys. Like, yeah, great. It'd be great. We don't play Kenny Pickett at all, but that offensive line, and especially that rookie left tackle that we just drafted. So he's out there protecting Mitchell Trubisky or Mason Rudolph, who are playing instead, who both play different styles of quarterback. They're more likely to run it up the middle or throw the ball away and things like this. And so these guys are going to get into that sort of feel. And then Kenny Pickett's going to come out there, who is much more of a mobile quarterback and who I've seen shades of like Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers in him in the way he plays his quarterback. And then all of a sudden that O-line has to shift the way they're playing, and that week one game is a little sloppier as a result. I would much rather them work those bugs out in those first few drives of each preseason game and then go, okay, now sit back and watch the rest of the game, talk with each other, figure out where the problems were, and let's get on the same page for week one. But
My,
yeah, like it's heartbreaking to see those injuries happen in preseason, and we see them every year. Every team, there's always going to be one or two guys around the league that take bad injuries in the preseason where we go, that didn't need to happen.
yeah, there's
But at the same,
superstars every single season where you're just like, Jesus Christ, do we really need to
right?
see this?
But at the same time, it's that risk versus reward. It's making sure that you're game ready for week one, or do we sit everybody and go, okay, well, week one's a wash. We're definitely not winning. We're going to look like garbage, and we just have to play from behind the rest of the season. Especially if you're in a good division like my Steelers are, or in a competitive middling division like your Bears are right now. Like an 0-1 start could be disastrous for either one of those teams because they could be playing from behind the rest of the year. I know you look at your team and go, we're not playing for a playoff spot this year anyway, but my philosophy is you should always be playing for a playoff spot. And starting 0-1 makes that tougher.
No,
And so
I agree. But my one question to you is, do you
Mhm.
think, because the Justin Fields played, I think, 7 or 8 snaps throughout that first game. Um,
Yep.
but do you think, let's say Kenny Pickett goes out there for the entire preseason and plays 30 snaps? Do you think those 30 snaps are truly gonna be enough to knock the rust away and truly get a proper connection and feel of the game going into week one?
Um, I think it could have a substantial growth increase for Broderick Jones. That is the only person that I think could really grow a large stride from having 30 snaps throughout preseason. I don't think he's going to necessarily have that many. He had 6 or 7 in that first game against the Bucks. I expect he'll probably have 15 or 16 this week. And then next week, I expect to see again maybe 6 at most. If not next week, might be a complete sit.
Yeah.
I really think we're only going to see more this week because it was kind of a co-opted thing with the Bills and the Steelers where we're like, hey, let's play a few more of our starters. Obviously, the big name guys who are veterans aren't going to be playing. So like on Steelers defense, you're not going to have TJ Watt coming after Josh Allen. You'll have Alex Highsmith out there, but you'll likely have Nick Herbig on the other side because he is that third edge rusher that's trying to build his name. So you're still going to see some of those rookies, and Kenny Pickett will likely have the same thing coming at him from that Bills defense. It's not going to be all of their
Yeah, you're not going to
first
see
string
Von
guys.
Miller.
No, no, you're not going to see Von Miller, just like you won't see TJ Watt. But you're still going to see some of the guys that you would in regular season through those first few series. And both of those teams and both those coaching staffs are intelligent enough that if they go out there and they start seeing it becoming a little more chippy or a little bit too physical, they're going to scale back and go, "Yep, no, we're not doing this anymore. You had your one series, Kenny. We're going to sit you down and we're going to put Mitch out there because we're not getting a good vibe from this. We
We
feel
can't
like
afford you
something
to get hurt.
exactly. We feel like something might happen and we don't want that, But that being said, like these bad injuries, it's not just preseason. You see them happen during the training camp as well
Hmm.
because these guys are, they're teammates, but they're playing for their futures. There's been a few times I've been watching George Pickens and Joey Porter Jr. go up against each other, and I'm like, man, one of these guys is going to get hurt because they're both going and giving it 100. They're just going full bore because they both want to prove, one, that he is one of the best up and coming wide receivers in the league, and the other one that he's going to be able to live up to his father's name in Pittsburgh, and so I feel like I'm just as likely to see a season-ending injury in training camp as I am in those preseason games because Mike Tomlin is very good at managing his starters, his players, his coaches to the point where if he sees something that he's not liking, he's going to pull the plug.
Yeah. And again, you and I have two very different philosophies on this, and I know a lot of people don't agree with mine.
Well, I do agree with yours. If I was the Bears, I would not be wanting Justin Fields next season. If this season goes well and they sign Matt Canada and we have the same coaching staff and everything, I expect to see Kenny Pickett almost zero next preseason
Yeah.
because he won't have anything to learn. Whereas if it goes the other way and we have a new coaching staff and a new playbook, then we're going to have to see Kenny Pickett more because we got to build up that chemistry. That's the other good thing that I like to see is, maybe we get those donkey calls out of the way here in preseason from Matt Canada. Like we saw after week 8 last year, he started to scale back and go, oh, maybe I should call more NFL ready plays instead
Maybe
of
I shouldn't
college
call a wide
plays.
receiver screen on 3rd and 14 for the
Maybe I
fourth
shouldn't be
time.
running a halfback draw to Najee Harris up the middle when it's 3rd and 12. We won't see so much of that at the start of the season if he can get that out of his system during the preseason. So, that's where I'm okay with some of this. I would love to just get rid of preseason altogether. We talked about this last year and the year before, I think, where, before we were doing this, we discussed it that if all the teams are on even ground and we just go right to regular season, I'm fine with that. The
I
tough
think
thing
there should
is,
be
how do you make
two.
all those cuts?
I think there should be two preseason games. It should be a week 1 preseason game, a bye week for everyone, and then a week 3, and then the bye week that we currently have. But
Yes.
what the preseason game should be is it shouldn't be for the starters. You shouldn't be looking at a guy that you know is going to be on the final 53-man roster. Like again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, DJ Moore, and some of these guys, and then go over to the defensive side, see Eddie
Hmm.
Jackson, or and look at them. We know they're going to be on the team. What this should be is it should be for rookies to get up to speed with the NFL play, and it should be guys going out there and competing and showing it's like, hey, I can be a rotational guy. I can be a backup. I can be a guy that's going out there and going to be a core special teams player.
Hmm.
It should be only 53 guys dressing, and those 53 guys are basically all the other guys that aren't your starting 11 for both sides. And to me, that's kind of where I look at it and go, you're going to be, because realistically, that's all preseason is anyways, is it's
Hmm.
just these guys competing for their jobs. And I've always said, and I firmly believe, that the first 4 weeks of the regular season, you don't really know what your team is and what your team has until that week 4, week 5, because that's when you've had live fire, and that's when the guys have really gone out there and shown what their chemistry is. You know what the team's going to be. And like last year, I knew going into about week 4, week 5 that the offense with Justin Fields is going to be better. He's going to make electric plays. He's going to keep the team in the game. The defense fucking horrible, so we're just going to ignore
Hmm.
that. And that, of course, that's what the year was. It was Justin Fields, basically the nickname. It was just him Fields because it was literally just him for the team last year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tougher for like the skill positions doing it that way though. That's the only thing, Like again, I use my team for reference every time because I follow them more than anybody else. But like for me looking at it, I'd much rather see, George Pickens and Pat Fryermuth out there while we're bringing Calvin Austin in to see what he's got. Rather than having the third and fourth string guys going, oh, Johnson's not playing, Pickens not playing. We've got these other guys. We're going to put Calvin Austin in. It's like, well, then the other team is just going to go, well, Calvin Austin is their best guy out there, so we're going to cover him harder than we would normally if we had to also cover Deontay Johnson or George Pickens. And so you don't get
But isn't
that
that
real feel of,
necessarily a better thing to have just to see, like with Calvin Austin, like if, for instance, the Bills, let's say in the hypothetical world, we're kind of going with my situation, and it's like the Bills go, okay, we feel like Calvin Austin is their best guy.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be better to see him go up against some of those double teams and have a little bit more pressure put on him just to see if he can be capable of dealing with that?
Well, no, just because he's not a number one receiver. That's the problem. You're not getting a true read on him because you know he's not going to be your number one going in.
Yep.
You know he's going to likely be your slot receiver, your number three, possibly your number four, depending on who else balls out during camp and preseason. And so you want to be able to see what kind of flashes he can do against the nickel and the dime cornerback, against the second string guys, stuff like that, because that's likely who he's going to be up against most often. He's not going to be out there against the top cornerbacks ever. Because if you've got Calvin Austin out there against the top cornerback, then you're going deep to George Pickens every time and you're getting a touchdown every single play. Like that's the thing and that's where I'd like to be able to see what sort of things we can do with those third guys in, especially since we didn't get to see Calvin Austin last year in his rookie year with that injury. I want to see where he's going to fit into this offense. Is he truly going to be our slot guy that's running routes, or is he going to be that fourth guy that comes in when we want to be running jet sweeps or wide receiver screens and things like that? And that's where I'd like to have the better skill guys out there still playing their proper positions so we can get a truer feel. I'd also like to have Kenny Pickett throwing that pass to him instead of Mitchell Trubisky, because at least I know I'm seeing what's truly going to happen instead of God knows what Mitch is going to do.
I don't think Mitch even knows what he's going to do. This is kind of
Half,
the weird thing, is that both of us have dealt with Mitchell Trubisky as our starting quarterback, and I told you at the beginning of last season, I warned Steelers fans, I was like, listen, yeah, he had that year off sitting behind Josh Allen, but when he gets into actual action, he can be the best quarterback in the NFL one play, and then he can be Nathan Peterman the next play. And and it's not even series to series, it's not even half to half, it's just play to play where you're going out going like, please God, it's like you're rolling a d20 in Dungeons and Dragons. You're going like, okay, all I need is a 7 or above to succeed. Okay, roll it. Okay, I got an 11. It's not a great play, but it's also it it it's fine. And then a lot of times you're like, okay, I got a fucking nat 1. He threw into triple coverage with no receiver around him. Of course, that makes sense.
And I mean, I took to heart what you said, and I anticipated that. And remember what I said. Like, I didn't want Mitchell Trubisky as my number one guy through the whole season unless he magically came out and blew everybody out of the water, which neither of us thought was going to happen. My goal was for him to start the season, and then around the bye week, Kenny Pickett becomes our starter. And it was, I think, 2 weeks before the bye week, Kenny Pickett became our starter. And so the last season played out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, with Mitch being in there just to take those hits while that offensive line was
trying to
figuring out who they were, and while Matt Canada was calling those donkey-ass plays. And that's sort of what happened. And then we had a couple weeks of that same thing happening with Kenny Pickett. He threw a bunch of picks as a result. And then we had the bye week, and it was a completely different offense and a completely different quarterback on the field for the remainder of that season.
Yeah.
And honestly, we discussed it several times. The only reason the Steelers did not A, make the playoffs, and B, have a playoff run was because TJ Watt was hurt for that first 7-8 weeks after week 1. I really believe that he was the difference maker on that team, and that's ultimately going to be this season as well. If TJ Watt stays healthy, the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the playoffs. If he does not, then we likely are not in the playoffs.
Again, you know me, I look at that division, I say, for the Steelers to make it out into the playoffs in that division, they're going to have miracles to be done just because of how difficult that division is. And so again, for your team this year, it really is a year of, we're just going to have to fucking see. And that's just what the year is for your team, and it's kind of weird territory for you to be in, just because your team has been for years and years of like, okay, yeah, no, we run the division, like everyone else has to play us.
It's been a couple of seasons now of this. We'll have to wait and see. I'll be honest with you, I'm more confident in this season than I have been the last two. And the last two, I still maintain that we were a borderline playoff team. Granted, it's still, unfortunately, because of how good he is, it hinges on one player, which you never really want for your team. But if he can stay healthy, then I believe we have a top three defense in the league.
Yep.
If he is not healthy, we're sitting probably 17 to 19.
I think you guys are still a top 15 defense even without.
Yeah. It's just tough because he's so dynamic, and you never know you never know if he's going to be rushing you for a sack, if he's going to be getting his hands up to try and knock the ball down or pick it off, or if he's going to drop back randomly the couple times he does and just mess with the quarterback's mind.
Yeah.
He's so dynamic. It's just I want him to stay healthy. He's the one play. Him and Fitzpatrick, the two players on that team, I do not want to see play a single snap in preseason.
Yeah. You can't, especially with TJ, because him and his brother are made out of paper mache. Like, they are the definition of a fucking glass cannon.
Right? They're too big. Like, it's great that they're so athletic and so talented, but their frames are so large that the muscles just explode and rip off the bone because they're like, we can't stretch that far. What are you doing?
I can't physically do this. Stop.
Right?
Yeah. But we've talked a bunch about your Steelers, and this is one of the things that that has just I've just been thinking about all week long. And from the look of our starting offense with the Chicago Bears this week, the stat line from Justin Fields, he was 3 for 3, 124 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And everyone that isn't a Chicago Bears fan immediately looked at that and said, oh, it was all DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert. It's not actually real. I was like, everyone was saying we need to get him more passing yards and more weapons. The second that he gets more weapons and passing yards, everyone's sitting back going, well, it's not actually him. He's not that. Like, he threw the ball backwards for screens. It was like the team was last in yak yards last year. Everyone was like, you need guys that can catch the ball and go make plays. You want to know who the two teams were? Or, I'll just give it an example. Guess who the number one team last year was for yak yards?
Either the Chiefs or the Dolphins?
It was the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And I don't hear a single person sitting back going like, Patrick Mahomes' life is too easy. He makes too many easy throws. His weapons just go out there and do it. It's like everyone's like, you look at the box score, like let's just say at the end of the day that if Fields went out there threw 4 touchdowns, 380 yards, no one's going to be sitting back going like, oh, it was just his weapons doing all that. It's like, that's the fucking point.
Yeah.
What do we think
exactly
Tom Brady did for years? Like, we always looked at Tom Brady and said, this is a guy that goes out there and literally goes back, goes 1-2, check down.
Right? And I mean, I agree with the sentiment of it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter because it's preseason. It's not it doesn't matter because, it was the other guys doing all the work. It's like, well, yeah, the quarterback's there to make the decision, and the guys that he's deciding to give the ball to are the ones that are there to do the work.
Yeah.
That is the point. That is the natural progression it's supposed to go. It doesn't matter because it's preseason, so we're not getting a true read on what it's going to feel like, when you're out there playing against the Vikings defense or the Green Bay Packers, and all that adrenaline's going. It's going to be different. But seeing that he's got weapons and tools that he can utilize now, so he doesn't have to scramble around and wait for the pocket to collapse enough that he has an open lane to run for 6 yards and hopefully not get destroyed in the process, is a significant improvement for your Bears offense.
Yeah. And just the amount of people that I saw go like, oh, it's fake stats. I'm like, you are the same guy that last year you were like, oh, he's just a running back. Like, even if you put guys and weapons around him, he's not going to be that good. And now that he showed it, it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, people just cannot accept that Fields had himself good plays. Yeah, it's preseason. It doesn't really matter. But, like, it was still the starting offense. It was the starting offensive line. It was the starting weapons going out there and doing what they needed to do. And the big thing that I saw from this, And again, how long have you known me and known my, more negative side of being a fan of the team and going like, I need to see it before I believe it. So this is, I'm glad you're sitting. So this is gonna come as a shock to you. I honestly believe that the Bears could have a top three offense this year because the stars just feel like they can align where it's
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields, he gets his number one weapon and DJ Moore, who was a guy that the last few years has literally had a rotating door of quarterbacks coming in. It's going like, hey, I'm Baker Mayfield. Here's a few passes. And then it's like, oh, hey, I'm Sam Darnold. Hey, I'm PJ Walker. Hey, the blah, 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 blah. You can name 8 guys that he's played with over the last 2 seasons
Mm-hmm.
at the starting quarterback position. Darnell Mooney is a guy that I said last year was going to show people that he was a top 15 wide receiver. Got hurt. Chase
Mm-hmm.
Claypool, I honestly think that he's in a system now where he doesn't have to be the number one guy. He's a little bit older. Hopefully he's more mature. The run game is as good as it is. The tight ends are a lot better. The offensive line is better. Darnell Wright looks like he's going to be one of the best right tackles in the NFL week one. Again, you never hear me talk about my team like this, but there's something telling me, and I know by me saying this, I'm going to completely fuck it up and the offense is going to be just as bad as normal. But there's something just telling me that I just have a feeling that this team could just have the opportunity to be one of the best offenses in football.
No, and I mean it's good that you say that, but at the same time, while you tend to be more negative towards your team, you don't shit on your team. This is something that's always blown my mind is every professional sports team has these super fans who all they do is bitch about their team, bring their team down, and talk about how garbage they are. And it's like, man, if they're so garbage, go cheer for another team. Like,
Yeah.
why are you here? Like, I get that in the Steelers fan base. Granted, it is much less often with the Steelers fan base, which I like to see. You know, there's much more positive people. We ride Steelers, win, lose, tie, we don't care. You know, we're Steelers fans through and through. You know, but I don't get it with some of these guys who just they want to shit on the team for the sake of shitting on them. You have a negative outlook, but you always say it's because I'm waiting for them to show me something. And
Yeah.
that's just it. You're waiting. You know, you're there, you're like, they've made good moves. I'm optimistic, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. That's what you are. You know, you're not
Yeah.
like a shit on your team or anything. So it doesn't surprise me that you would eventually come out and say this because I agree. The Bears do look like they could have maybe not top 3 in the league, but definitely top 3 in the NFC for offense. The holes with your Bears this year, unfortunately, is going to be more in your front seven in your defense, which is good that you guys have a good offense because you're likely going to have to be putting up 30 to 35 points a game in order to win. You know, and that makes it difficult to win games. And that's why, you know, you're like, yeah, we're going to have great offense, but you're also like, we're probably only going to win 6 games, which is fairly accurate, I think, barring, you know, those swing games. Because your Bears, much like my Steelers, play a lot of swing games where it comes down to just one play. One play bounces a little bit differently. Your team wins or loses instead of the actual outcome that happened. You know, and that's what makes I think why you're such a long-standing Bears fan, and it's why I'm such a long-standing Steelers fan because we don't know for sure what that outcome is going to be. We don't see a lot of blowouts on either side of our team. We don't get blown out often, and we don't blow out other teams very often. You
Yeah.
know, and that's what we like. We like to see that more defensive-minded, that more strategic style of football. But I do agree. You guys have a lot on paper that says you could have a great offense. I disagree on your take for Chase Claypool. The problem with Chase Claypool is he's always thought he's a number one guy. You know, in Pittsburgh, he was never in position to be the number one guy.
No.
You know, he barely was in position to be the number two guy. We wanted him to be the slot guy who basically became the next Hines Ward, and he couldn't take that. And it's like, no, man, we want you playing that 3 spot. You're basically an extra tight end, and that is what he needs to get into his head. If your Bears can convince him to do that and just be like, hey, play slot, be our third tight end essentially, you're going to be going over the middle of the field and either throwing a big block or catching a short pass and getting to throw a guy to the ground as you break a tackle. Like that is his role because he is a big moose, and that's what he needs to get in his head and how he needs to start playing. I was so excited when the Steelers drafted him because I was like, oh my God, he's like a big giant version of Hines Ward. He's gonna start laying guys out. I can't wait. And then he started doing TikTok dances and bitching because he wasn't the number one guy. And it's like, dude, you're not number one caliber.
No.
I'm sorry.
No, and again, Chase Claypool to me is more of the wild card, but yeah, but I kind of want to do something a little bit fun. This is something that me and my old man did a little bit earlier this week, where I just kind of went over his Raiders schedule because he's a Las Vegas Raiders fan, and I said, which like both of us are going to kind of take a look at the schedule and see what we think of both of our teams, whether they're going to win or lose. I think that'll be a fun little thing. Both look at the full Steelers schedule and the Bears schedule and see what we both agree on and disagree on in terms of schedule for win-loss record. Is that something that you're up to do?
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. So, do you want to do Steelers or Bears first? I
Let's
feel
do
like
the
we should.
Steelers first.
I was gonna say let's do the Steelers first because I feel like again this will be a little bit more optimistic.
We'll
Um,
end on the pessimism. I mean, you know what? I'm probably going to be more optimistic on both of our teams because I tend to play that devil's advocate more towards the optimism when it
yeah.
comes to this sort of stuff. I'm a
I sit
pessimist
back.
when it's my own life. When it's me, I'm thinking worst case scenario in every fucking thing.
Yeah.
But when it's the team I'm cheering for, I'm going to look at best case scenario.
I always view myself more as like the realist in the scenario, as like this is more realistically the outcome for my team.
I, right? And I'm gonna hate this so much for my team because I've seen so many people doing the Steelers schedule this way, and so often they end up with like 13 or 14 wins, and I'm so afraid that I'm gonna end up there, and I don't believe that's gonna happen with my Steelers. I don't think they're winning 14 games, but everybody I'm watching do this, they're like, oh, they're gonna win 14 games. No, they're not. But I mean, when you look at it logically against the teams they're playing, like I get it. I get where they're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm literally just at the moment I'm just creating a small little docs just to see at the
Yeah.
end. But yeah, no, this is going to be really interesting to do. So obviously starting out week 1, San Francisco heading into Steel Town. Do you think the Steelers come out
Th-
with a dub?
This is a big game. It's been almost a decade, or it has been a decade, since the Steelers have opened the season at home. Um, Fans are going to be rabid. We're all healthy. We talked about the 49ers ad nauseum at the start of this pod. We talked in depth about the quarterback and about the red flags around injuries. I really do think with the slow starts the Niners have historically and the hot starts the Steelers often have, we do often win week 1 and then falter weeks 2 to 6 if we're going to fall apart. And so I do believe this is going to be a win. I think it's going to be a competitive game, but it's ultimately going to be it's going to be the TJ Watt show. It's going to be close, and then in the final 4 minutes, TJ Watt's going to make a play that's going to decide the game for both teams. He's going to either pick off Brock Purdy or he's going to get a big sack to push him outside of field goal range, and it'll end the game effectively. And the Steelers will win week 1.
So I agree with you. This is going to be an insanely competitive game, but I just have this feeling that the 49ers, they're going to go out on their hot girl summer and be like, listen, we should have been in the Super Bowl last year. We had all of this negative, and they're just going to walk out with the biggest chip on their shoulder, and they're saying, listen, Philly, we're coming. And I think the Steelers being a little bit more of a younger team, Kenny Pickett, I think the 49ers have a better defense just all around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think their offense is going to be a little bit more consistent than what we're going to see out of Matt Canada. And I think, again, going to be really competitive, but I think the 49ers coming in, they're going to take week
Mhm.
one, and it's going to be probably one of the games of the week. It's a shame that it's at
I
11
think so.
a.m.
Yeah.
That should be one of those games where it's closer to like a 4 o'clock game as opposed to an
Yeah.
11.
Yeah. I feel it should have been the game of the week, that 2:25
Yeah.
kickoff, or 4:25, I guess, if we're doing Eastern time. But no, I agree. The Niners are going to come in with that chip, but don't discount the chip that the Steelers are going to have, because you get a lot of the players are young, but there's some veterans in there, and the coaching staff is very veteran as well. And they're all looking at this going, really? All you analysts think we're going to finish fourth place in this division? All right, we're going to go out and fuck up the Niners, and we'll see what comes down.
Yep. Fair
But
enough.
yeah,
So,
it's going to
but
be a good game.
this is our first disagreement. Next week, in week number 2, the 49er or not the 49ers, the Steelers have Massage Watson coming into town with the Cleveland Browns. Sterling, take
Hmm.
it away.
Coming into town, and it's Monday Night Football as well. The Steelers play really well under the lights. Um, I, you know me, I don't have faith in the Browns, and this is a tough division where most of the series, I believe, will split home and homes. This one, I'm not sure if it'll split, but I'm very confident the Steelers win this one at home against the Browns on Monday Night Football.
I think after the loss to the 49ers in what will be a competitive game, and going into Monday night and knowing this is a rival and knowing this is a team that a lot of people are saying, you know what, like you have to prove this year that you're going to need to beat this team. I think the Steelers go out there and they beat the Cleveland Browns. So you're 2-0, we're 1-1. Next, the week 3, they go into Vegas facing off against the Raiders. I think you're actually going to be in Las Vegas during that particular weekend. Am I correct in that,
Um,
or?
Maybe. I mean, we've been thinking about it, but it's a little pricey, so we might not end up going. I know I looked at tickets for the game when this schedule came out, and they were just ridiculous. So
Oh yeah, I'm not
definitely
saying
not
that you
going for
guys are
that.
going, but I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure you're in Vegas that particular
we
weekend.
thought about it, but we might not end up going.
Hmm.
We'll see.
But week
Haven't
3,
haven't made that decision final yet. But again, this is primetime game, Sunday Night Football against the Raiders in Vegas. This is a storied rivalry. I always want to pick my Steelers, and I am going to pick my Steelers, but even with a bad Raiders team, I do still worry a little bit that, the emotions sometimes can get the better of them. So I think it'll be closer than what it should be. I feel like this should be a blowout win for the Steelers. They should be able to handle the Raiders easily, but I unfortunately think they'll let the Raiders stay in the game.
I think the Raiders are going to be a bottom 3 team this year.
Hmm.
I have zero faith in their offense, mainly because it's the Jimmy Garoppolo show, and then it's who the fuck else. Obviously, you have Devonte Adams, who is phenomenal. He's always going to do great work. I think he's potentially going to be a guy that goes up out there and terrifies your Steelers' young secondary a little bit early on in that game. But I agree with you. The Steelers are going to walk in. I think it's going to be a lot less close than what you think, because I don't think the Raiders have that good of a defense. It's pretty much the Max Crosby show, and who else wants to show
Hmm.
up. I think the Steelers are going to walk out primetime football, and they're just going to slap the Raiders around. They're going to end up taking them. First October game of the year in Houston this time.
I mean, it's the Texans, man. I think the Texans are going to be bottom five this year again. I don't expect them to do much. Granted, they've got a better defense. Um, they just drafted their quarterback, but I really don't see the Texans being able to do much against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And that's ultimately it's going to be a defensive battle. And I think by that point, any kinks that we'll see in the offense for Pittsburgh will start to be getting worked out. And at that point, they'll start opening up the playbook a little more for Kenny Pickett to start audibling, and we'll see them become more comfortable. This will be an easy win for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Texans, they're going to be better than what they showed last year, but they are still a team that looks like Swiss cheese at the moment. There's holes fucking everywhere on this roster, and rookie quarterback going up against one of the best defenses in the league. It's going to be extraordinarily tough, and I agree. The Steelers are going to take that one. Then you have the division rival Baltimore Ravens coming in, and
This is one I've struggled with. This is going to be the first one where I'm really not sure what's going to happen this year. Um, I think it's ultimately going to be weather dependent. Honestly, if it's a nice sunny day, then unfortunately I think the Ravens are going to take it. If it turns into a sloppy game, that's where the Steelers will be able to take over and win. But I think this will be the first loss that the Steelers have this year. I think they're going to lose to the Ravens at home.
yeah, I also have the Ravens coming in. I think a lot more people are discounting the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson, he actually has a lot more of a supporting cast around him. We talked about this, I think, in our first official show about, the Odell Beckham coming in. I think it's going to do nothing but good for the Ravens, and it's going to be a close game. Sunshine or snow,
Always is.
they're always close games, and
Hmm.
I think the Ravens, I think they come in and take this. But now we
Yeah.
have, I
I
believe,
think the average for the point difference between those two is under 2.5 per game.
yeah. So going now up against the Rams, take it away.
Well, traveling to LA,
Yep.
playing the Rams, you know what? It's hard to predict at this point. If we're looking at the same Rams team that we saw most of last season, and with how well this Steelers fan base travels, I feel like this is going to almost be a home game for Pittsburgh, and they're going to go into LA and they're going to win because the Steelers fan base is going to be just as loud as the Rams have, if not louder.
Yeah, I look at this game. I do not think the Rams are going to be anywhere close to the team that they were when they won the Super Bowl. I have basically no faith in Matthew Stafford because he's one of these weird guys. He won his Super Bowl. He looked great. Was banged up a lot last year. This is a guy that we've seen banged up year after year after year. And the Rams team, they just look like a team that they just need to be on that cusp of a rebuild, and it's going to come sooner rather than later. So I say Steelers walk in, they take that one. Then they go back home against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
The Jags this year are one of my wild card teams. I really think they're going to make strides this year and show what Trevor Lawrence is becoming in this league. They've improved on offense, they've improved on defense. I think this is going to be one of the toughest losses early in the season for the Steelers. They're going to lose at home, and it's not going to be pretty, I think. I think the Jags are going to tear them apart. And ultimately this is going to be sort of the eye opener for Pittsburgh, and they're going to start going, okay, what do we need to change to improve, because this can't happen again.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the Jags this year, Trevor Lawrence, obviously, he's
Hmm.
just going to have weapons. It's going to be a very, very tough game for your Steelers. Now going up against the Tennessee Titans.
Well, after the previous week with the rough loss to the Jags, unfortunately, this is going to be a short week for Pittsburgh as well because they play Thursday night against the Titans. Um, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to bounce back. I think this is going to be a bit of an upset loss, and the Steelers are going to lose to the Titans on Thursday night as well, just because of the short week, and they're going to be trying to make some changes after that bad Jags loss. It's it's going to be a rough couple weeks for Pittsburgh, but
I
I think
think
they.
it's going to be a rough game for Pittsburgh, obviously, after getting beat down by the Jags. I just don't think the Tennessee Titans are that good of a team that I think it's going to be a sloppy, sloppy game. It's not going to
Mhm.
be fun for anyone to realistically watch, and unfortunately, primetime game. I'm giving your Steelers the win this one just because I think the Steelers defense is going to be the main component that wins that game. Because again, you have Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, or is it going to be Will Levis? Who's going to be the quarterback of that team? And I just I think the Titans are going to be in a lot of growing pains this year. So I think the
I,
Steelers are going to win this game, but unfortunately, it's going to be a sloppy, sloppy affair.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be sloppy. And I think it's going to be like a last minute loss by the Steelers. And it's not going to be one of those quarterbacks that does it. It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins making a big play or Derrick Henry breaking a big play, and likely will be one on like a field goal to close it out, not a touchdown.
Now going up against the Green Bay Packers.
Um, you know, I'm curious to see what Jordan Love's going to be this year. I know you're a little scared to see what Jordan Love's going to be this year because what if he's the next reincarnation of
Stop,
Brett
stop,
Favre
stop.
slash
No,
Aaron
no, I
Rodgers?
don't need to hear it.
Um,
I have sharp objects in my hand right now. I have
yeah,
a thing of thumbtacks. I don't need to
I'm.
start slamming my head aggressively into the pointy end.
I think the Packers though they don't have much else. You know, they lost Aaron Rodgers and they lost a lot of their other weapons and tools over the last couple seasons, both on offense and defense. Their defense looks mediocre, you know, to slightly good. So they might give Kenny Pickett and that Steelers offense a bit of a run, but their offense is not going to be able to do anything against ours, especially after, as I believe, a bad loss to the Jags and then a last minute loss to the Titans. They're going to come out hungry and they are going to absolutely rip the Packers apart at home. Um, Especially that defense and that secondary. That's when that secondary is going to have to come together because I think we'll see those changes come into effect after the Jags loss, and we'll see some shifts around in the secondary. And after the Titans, we'll see them come together and they'll beat the Packers handily.
Yeah, again, this game to me all depends on Jordan Love, and I don't think Jordan Love and the weapons that they have on this offense. They got a lot of tight ends and young wide receivers in this draft class, but they're young. And going up against a defense as talented as the Steelers, to me, it's just I think the Steelers win this one. So now you go up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland.
Yeah, and I think Kenny Pickett begins his continuation of the domination of the Browns that Ben Roethlisberger always had. We're going to go into Cleveland, and this will be the one series in our division where we sweep this season.
I think this is going to be a very, very tough game because I think at this point, Deshaun Watson, he's going to be a lot more familiar with the team around him. He's going to feel a lot more comfortable. And I think the Browns are actually going to start to hit a little bit of a stride at this current moment. And they're going to be a lot more dangerous around. And I think at home, just because, again, they're going to sit back and go, listen, we know you guys have been our daddy for years and years and years. And you beat us early on in the season, but you're not coming into the doghouse and winning. And I'm giving this one to the Browns.
That's fair. You know, I think what we're going to see in Cleveland, in my opinion, the hottest coaching seat right now is Kevin Stefanski. And if they come out and have a slow start to the season, I think they have a coaching change partway through. And that's what is ultimately going to be the hurdle that the Browns have to overcome the rest of the year. And that's why I don't think they have a chance against the Steelers.
Now going into Cincinnati, another Ohio State team.
Um, this one I'm not so confident about. You know, by this point in the season, you know, we're past Thanksgiving in the U.S. The Bengals and Joe Burrow are likely starting to heat up by this point in the season, and it's going to be a home game for the Bengals. I think the Bengals will take this. The Steelers are going to give them a run. If both teams come into this healthy, it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be a gritty game. And I think the Steelers are going to sort of show the Bengals that they're not just going to easily be able to walk away with this division every season coming forward.
Yeah, I think
But
this is going to
ultimately, the
be
Bengals will win.
I agree with you. I think the Bengals are going to win. I think this is going to be a closer game than what might necessarily look like on paper, but I think the Bengals at this point, Joe Burrow is going to be fully healthy again. He's going to be back on the field. And after what could have been probably likely, if Burrow is out, let's say the first 4 games, the team
Hmm.
could struggle, and Burrow is going to. He's going to be on his shit at the moment, kind of. I honestly feel like Joe Burrow this year is going to almost be reminiscent of Joe Burrow in his final year at LSU, and he's going to be a man on a mission. We saw what he was like after he took that hit the season prior to the national championship year, and it was a different mentality. And I think Burrow, he's going to look at this. He goes, This was a calf injury that
Mhm.
was by no one else's fault but my body's, and he's going to go out there and just. I think this is going to be a special year for Joe Burrow. And but yeah, now moving up against the Arizona Cardinals, and tell me, why do you think the Steelers are going to beat the Cardinals? And tell me in under 15 seconds.
The Cardinals are trash and are likely going to be finishing last place this year, and so it's going to be an easy win for Pittsburgh. Arizona might as well not even fly out. They should just, say, no,
Had
you guys take the win.
Yep, I cannot disagree at all. The Cardinals, they're kind of fielding and kind of taking some of my hockey knowledge here. They're basically fielding an AHL team.
Yeah.
They don't have Kyler Murray. We don't even know if Kyler Murray is going to be able to play at this point. But yeah, Steelers take this one. Now going up against the New England Patriots.
Now, this is going to be a tough one because, I'm not as worried about the Patriots as I have been in years past because we've kind of seen that whole Patriots dynasty was more Tom Brady and less Bill Belichick.
Yep.
So it doesn't worry me as much. What does worry me is this is another short week for the Steelers. They play Sunday morning against the Cardinals, and then they turn around and they have to play Thursday night football against the Patriots. That being said,
It's a home game.
both games are at home, so there's no travel time, and this Patriots team is looking like they're going to be a basement dweller in that AFC East. I don't think Ezekiel Elliott with that signing for the Patriots is going to do magical things and uplift this team. I think it'll be a close game, and I think the Steelers are going to play it safe, and we likely will see a slow roll play, but they will win this game, likely in the final minutes on probably a field goal it'll be a low scoring. I don't think we're going to see a lot of flash from this team on this day because they're going to be tired coming off of a short week. But they will win against the Patriots.
I agree. I just don't think the Patriots are that good of a team. You just don't know what you have in Mac Jones and the weapons that he has. When Juju Smith-Schuster is your number one wide receiver, there's problems. And when I think about that Patriots team, I sit back and I go, who fucking else do they have as weapons? And I sit back and I can't think of anyone else other than Juju Smith-Schuster. And I know there's probably someone else there, but Ezekiel Elliott,
That's
again,
it.
one running back does not change the entire fortune. And yes, the Patriots, they like to run the ball. They are a team that can run the ball successfully. They beat the Bills a few years ago literally by just running the ball. They threw 3 passes. They had 3 passing attempts. But yeah, I just don't see them beating the Steelers. Now going into Indianapolis, and why do you think the Steelers are going to beat the Colts?
I mean, it as of right now, the Colts don't really look like they have a whole lot going on for them. They've got Jonathan Taylor, and that's kind of it.
But they might not even have Jonathan Taylor.
Right? Yeah, that's true. They might. I mean, if they don't have Jonathan Taylor by the 17th of December, then yeah, they're definitely not doing anything this year. But I don't see enough upside from Indianapolis to warrant them being able to pull out a win against the Steelers, even at home. Like that. The only reason I could see it happening is the game time hasn't been decided. So depending on where they place this game that week, at what time point, the Steelers might shoot themselves in the foot and be looking ahead. So you know what? I actually am going to go the other way. I think the Steelers are going to falter this week, and they're going to lose to the Colts because they're too busy looking ahead to their game against the Bengals the following week.
Yeah, you know what? That's not something that I actually really thought about in this scenario. The old classic trap game.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, he has the makeup to be a really good quarterback, but he's just so raw. And the Colts, I think a lot of Colts fans know this year they are going to be going through a lot of growing pains with that young man. I'm actually going to give the Steelers the win this week, just because I think, again, that defense is just going to be too much for the young man. Even if it is a trap type game, I think Mike Tomlin is one of those coaches where he's going to sit down to his team and say, listen, We know we have the Bengals next week, and that is a much more important game than this one. But we
Mhm.
need to go out there and beat this team. Because if we don't, everything what everyone is saying about us is true.
Yeah, and I mean, my opinion on this game may change down the road. I'm just, I know my Steelers. I know some of these older guys, and if we're dealing with some minor injuries around that week, I could see, I could see Mike Tomlin sitting TJ Watt down and going, "Look, you haven't been going at 100% because you're a little hurt. We're not going to let you play this week because we want you out there against Joe Burrow next week." And I think things like that are likely going to contribute to why I think this trap game will get the Steelers. Even though Mike Tomlin is so on top of it, I don't think this is an avoidable one because that Bengals game is so important.
Yeah. So going into the Bengals, I'm gonna jump in and start. Bengals are gonna win this one, even though they're going into Pittsburgh. It's December, um, 2 days before Christmas. Like I said earlier, I think Joe Burrow is just gonna be on one of those years where it's, last year we lost in the playoffs to Mahomes. I just think he's gonna be on a completely different level this year, and he's gonna whip his wiener out and say, "Hey Pittsburgh, play with this because that's all you're
Yep.
getting this year." And I think this it's not even the Bengals beating the Steelers. It's Joe Burrow looking at all of his weapons and saying, "Listen, I'm just gonna throw you open. All you need to do is put it in your hands." And they have the weapons to do it. And it's gonna be like, "Listen, we're gonna drop a 40 bomb. That's
Yep.
what's gonna happen. They're the best, one of the best defenses in the league. It don't matter to us." So yeah,
And I think if Joe Burrow tries to whip his wiener out, TJ Watt's going to slap it to the ground and stomp on it. Because, I mean, you look at what TJ Watt has done to Joe Burrow since he came into this league. Out of all the other defensive players in the league, who's had his number more often than anybody? It's TJ Watt. And he's reminded Joe Burrow of that on several occasions. Reminds him that he's in his head. And I think that's what we see this week, especially after that trap game loss that I'm anticipating, after the earlier season loss to the Bengals. This is at home, right before Christmas. The fans are going to be nuts. TJ Watt, if he is healthy, he is going to show why he's the best defensive player in the league yet again. And I think we'll see multiple turnovers by Joe Burrow, facilitated by TJ Watt yet again, and the Steelers will win this. Likely a very tight game. I don't see the Bengals putting up 40 because I don't see the Steelers putting up 40. I think this is going to be like a 23-20 final for the Steelers, or like 20-17, something like that, on a field goal coming from that Joe Burrow turnover in the final 2 minutes.
so going up, you're now going into Seattle to play the Seahawks.
This is a tough game. I mean, they're playing on New Year's Eve. So who's going to be more distracted? Is it going to be the Seahawks players because they're at home on New Year's Eve, they get to play a game and then they can go celebrate with their families? Or is it going to be the Steelers players because they're like, "Oh man, when I finish this game and get home so we can celebrate New Year with our families?" Um, we don't know what we're going to see from this Seahawks team this year yet. It's all up to Geno Smith. If Geno Smith balls out this year like he did last year, the Seahawks are going to be a force to be reckoned with because they have that 1-2 punch at receiver
One,
while
two,
they still
three
have
punch.
Tyler Lockett sitting in the slot going, "I can get every first down we need, you guys, and I won't take a single hit doing it."
Yeah.
So it's this is a difficult one, man. I mean,
To be honest with you, might make your decision a little bit easier. I have this marked as a loss for the Steelers, just mostly because I think Pete Carroll, he's gonna have that defense playing a lot better this year. And I think he's going to have Geno Smith, maybe not to that level that he was last year, but still at a pretty decent success level. And the weapons that they have in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think
mhm.
your secondary is going to have an extraordinarily tough day. And
that
to
that's
me,
where
that
I've been yeah, that's where I've been leaning too because, you know, as I said, I predict that win the week before. I expect this defense to be completely gassed after holding the Bengals to under 25 points. And so I do expect, TJ Watt's not going to have his full step going, and Minkah Fitzpatrick might be a little banged up. So I have been leaning more towards this being possibly a loss for the Steelers. Yes.
So I'm going to mark you down as a loss
Yeah.
for this one.
Yeah.
And then final game of the regular season, January 7th, going into Baltimore, Maryland to face off against the Ravens.
Well, this is going to be a revenge game and likely a battle for the final playoff spot game. And I think it's going to be an exact mirror of the earlier game that we saw Pittsburgh and Baltimore play, which is how this always goes between this rivalry every single season. It's likely going to be a final score of 12
Very
to 10.
low.
Yep. I don't think I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be able to score a touchdown that game. I think it's going to be a field goal battle, and I think Pittsburgh will win it in the end, though. Just like the Ravens went into Pittsburgh and took a win, I think Pittsburgh will go into Baltimore. It's very rare either one of these teams sweeps the other. They often split the series, and oftentimes it is on each other's turf that they pull these wins out. And so I think this will fall the same way. It's a winter game in Baltimore. It's not going to be a great game for Odell Beckham to be running down the field and catching big passes. It's going to be a ground and pound game. And I think the Steelers have a better ground and pound than the Ravens do.
I'm giving this one to the Ravens, but the reason that I'm doing it is because I agree with you. I think this is going to be one of those games where it's a little bit sloppy by both teams. Both are fighting for the playoffs. Both down the stretch have just been going, and having some tough games. And I think it's going to come down to field goals. And unfortunately, when you look at both teams' kickers, who's the guy that is just in the highest pressure situations that is just needed at any given moment? It's Justin Tucker. I think Justin Tucker goes out there, kicks a 62-yard field goal to win it.
Granted, I mean, he is the better kicker. I think ultimately it's going to be who's the better game managing quarterback. And as young as he is, I think Kenny Pickett's going to be better than Lamar Jackson at managing the game. That being said, I don't even think Lamar Jackson's playing this game. We're into January by now. Lamar Jackson's been hurt for 3 or 4 weeks by this point. And so it's
that's going to be
Tyler
very
Huntley.
dependent. And for me, I'm just depending on everyone is healthy at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, so at the end of this, you have your Steelers record as 11-6, and I have your Steelers record at 9-8.
Yeah.
So a little bit difference, but still fairly close.
Yep. And ultimately, like, I've looked at the schedule a lot, and 10-11 wins is, with the ease of schedule we have, minus those trap games, that's what we should be able to pull out. And 11 games in the AFC should be enough for a playoff spot, that wild card spot.
Yep.
I think the Bengals are going to have a better record than that. So they're definitely taking the division. But I just... Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this, is that I have placed the Steelers fourth in the division, not for them the Steelers are going to completely fall off the wagon, they're going to be this dog shit team. No, I've never said that. I think the Steelers are going to be fourth just because each team is going to be approaching that 10-win mark, and it's just going to be, 2, 3, and 4. It's basically going to be decided by 1 or 2 games. And that's how close that division is, and that's how good that division is. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see.
That's where we disagree, is the 2, 3, and 4. I think it's going to be more 1, 2, and 3 are going to be very close. I much like you say about the Lions and show me, I don't have any faith in the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, I think they're going to come out. They might look good in week 1. They're going to slowly tank. The cracks are going to show. They're not going to win enough games. I think Kevin Stefanski is the first head coach fired this year. And at that point, you go, okay, well, a new head coach coming in, Deshaun Watson is not going to be able to carry that team.
Yeah.
It's too dysfunctional of an organization. And it's going to be like 13 wins for the Bengals, 11 for either the Ravens or the Steelers and 10 or 9 for the other one. And that's what it's going to be. The Bengals aren't even going to break 500. Or the Browns, sorry. The Browns won't even break 500. They'll be 8 and 9 at best, and that's at best. I think they're more likely a 5 or 6 win team.
So now moving over to my Chicago Bears, week 1 at home against the Cheeseheads. For me, this is kind of a terrifying game, mainly because I just don't know what Jordan Love and that Packers offense is going to be. But I'm going to give the Bears the win on this one just because I think Justin Fields is going to say, listen, Aaron Rodgers, my first 2 years of playing in this league, disrespected the Bears. Now he's gone, Jordan Love, it's a brand new rivalry. You have two young bucks out there going up against each other. Both know this historic rivalry. One guy has been a part of the rivalry a little bit longer and on the winning side, but he hasn't been the player playing it. I think Justin Fields is going to take this team and say, listen, we might not be the best team in the NFL, but we're going to fuck your shit up. And you better believe it. You are not coming into our house. Your quarterback's not running up into the end zone yelling at our fans, who owns you? I own you. That's not going to happen. I think the Bears take this one.
I completely agree. You know, the Packers have their growing pains this year. You know, we saw it Aaron Rodgers' first year. You know, they didn't come out and they weren't like superstar Packers right away with Aaron Rodgers. There was that gradual burn to get there. And I think we'll see the same thing with Jordan Love. He's got to prove himself first. And I agree. I think Justin Fields is the one coming out with the chip on his shoulder this week going, this division is finally up for grabs now that Rodgers is gone. This is the statement game. This is where we show everybody it's our division now.
I think this is arguably one of the most important games of the entire year for the Chicago Bears because it's a 225 game. It's at home. There's no excuses. There's not the Aaron Rodgers monster hanging over your head going, I'm going to beat you because I own the team.
I do have to say, like, I think the Bears are winning. You know, I've established that's a win for sure. There is the tiniest part of me, though, that's like, what happens if Jordan Love breaks pocket, runs into the end zone, and pulls that fucking champ move just like Aaron Rodgers always did? Like, I can just see the tears in the Bears fans' eyes now if that happened.
3? Do you think 3 is good enough? Maybe 4?
Yeah,
5?
one
maybe?
for each eye. Yeah.
I don't need that in my life.
I don't think it'll happen. It's just there's this small part of me that thinks it would be so hilarious to see, just because of the like Bears fans would riot. I think you'd see a couple of guys out of the stands coming at Jordan Love for that. Like that would be the straw that broke the camel's back for the fans. They'd be like, no, we dealt with this for the last 15 years. We can't do it again.
15? Motherfucker, try 30.
Well, I was just counting Aaron Rodgers' stretch. Brett Favre usually wasn't quite as arrogant about his wins. You know, he wasn't as trash talky as Aaron Rodgers was. So, you know, you still got beat down, but he was a little bit more respectable about it. Aaron Rodgers threw it in your face.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it. Like,
no,
to me, this is going to be one of those.
You would turn it off and you'd text me and be like, "Fuck you, I hate you."
And that small like 1% chance you think happened. Imagine what's going on through my brain, because it's not 1%. It's a lot fucking higher. It's like 50% where I'm going, this shit cannot happen. Lightning can't strike. They can't catch lightning in a bottle 3 goddamn times. And if it happens, this monitor that's right in front of me, my head's going through it. It's not going to be my hand. It's going to be me grabbing it and smashing it over my goddamn skull because I'm going to be so enraged.
Out the window. Yeah.
The window's too far away. I'm in a basement right now, so I'm going to have to pick it up, unplug stuff. It's just going to be easier. Pick it up, smash.
You should really set up a tripod with a camera and just record yourself that whole game just in case it happens, because you could have yourself a viral TikTok if that happens. Bears fan loses shit because Jordan Love is the next coming of Brett Favre / Aaron Rodgers.
Where's the alcohol?
And this is only week 1 on the Bears schedule. Oh my.
Week 2, we're going into Tampa Bay to face off against the Buccaneers. I am going to give my Bears the win in this one just because the Buccaneers are just such a clusterfuck here at the moment. They don't know who their quarterback's going to be, and they are just kind of
I
in
do.
this mode. Who's their quarterback? Because I'm pretty sure the Bucks are calling you up, going like, who do you got? Because we're not sure about it yet either.
Yeah. We got the guy that we all know I have zero faith in as a quarterback. It's
Yeah,
going to be Baker Mayfield going out there and losing to the Chicago Bears because that's what Baker Mayfield does best.
yeah, he does do that. Now the Bears are going into Kansas City to lose against the Kansas City Chiefs. Happy to just
Right.
quickly move on to that one. That one's not going to be
Well,
much of a question.
it's not going to be a question. The Chiefs are going to win. Do you think the Bears can compete? Is this going to be a blowout? Do you think your Bears can do something? Because I mean, the Chiefs' defense is not great. You know, they lost Frank Clark, so their defense is less than it was last year. I think the Bears have a chance to at least showcase themselves. You know, another afternoon game of America, like America's game, 225 against the Chiefs. Like I think with this offense that the Bears have, this could be a fun shootout to watch. Yes, the Chiefs win, the Bears will lose, but we could we see the Bears put up more than 35 points in losing that game?
I look at this
Like I
game and I say I kind of go back to last year when the Bears went up against the Eagles, and the hope was just so down on this team, and the Bears went out and played the Eagles, arguably the best matchup that the Eagles had had that entire year. I think this could be one of those games. I think the Bears last year, not only did they show that they were better than what their record said, they went up against every single team and said, "You might beat us, but you are going to be bloody and bruised afterwards, and we are going to scream, scratch, kick, and fight our way to what is going to be a close game." And I think this game is going to be closer than what people initially anticipate. I just said it's
closer
going
but
to.
high scoring.
I don't even think it's going to be that high scoring. I think you're
No?
probably going to see this game be one of those situations where it's going to be something like a 23 to 21 type game. I could be completely wrong on this, and the Bears go in there and put up 3 points, and Patrick Mahomes whips out his wiener and says, "Listen, you guys could have drafted me, but you drafted Trubisky instead, so I'm just going to throw up a 50 bomb."
Yeah, I think he's going to put up close to 50. I think it's going to be more of like a 45 to 35 final. You know, I think is what we're going to see there. But I'm glad you said that because as much as that week 1 game is so important for the Bears, this game is very important as well because this will be their way of showing that, hey, all we need to do is build our defense now and we can almost hang with the big dogs. We're
Yep.
almost there.
We're
Like,
one of
get
those
ready,
teams that can
NFL.
fight. Yep.
Exactly. Get ready because within the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to be talking about us again, finally.
Yep. Going into week number 4 up against the Denver Bronco Donkeys.
Let's ride,
Broncos country. Let's ride.
right? Broncos country coming into Chicago. I mean, this is going to be a different Broncos team because it's got a substantial upgrade in the coaching. Um, the defense has improved because, of course, as we talked about with the last game, Frank Clark sort of just hopped over, stayed in that AFC West, and just joined the Broncos instead. I know he's an aging defensive player, but he is still a fearsome player. Um, this is going to be a good game. This is going to be a really good test for your Bears offensive line as well. Are they going to be able to keep Justin Fields safe and keep him upright? I think this will be the first week where we truly see a little bit of that just him Fields play again because he's going to have to break pocket more often and he's going to have to scramble a little bit. It's going to be a bit of a scary game, but I ultimately do think your Bears are going to be able to beat the Broncos because I just I don't know if Russell Wilson can bounce back from what happened to him last year, even with Sean Payton.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I kind of look at the schedule and I just sit back and I go, I just don't know because
I agree.
because I want to say that the Bears are going to win this game, and I'm gonna mark it down as the Bears winning this game. But this is one of those ones where it could just be a complete clusterfuck of a game, and I just don't know what's gonna happen. And if Russell Wilson is back to playing like himself, you
That's
know,
exactly it. If Russell Wilson looks like he did when he was with the Seahawks again in the first 3 weeks, then my opinion on this shifts completely, and the Broncos will decimate your Bears, unfortunately. But as it stands right now, preseason, we don't know what they're going to look like. Looking at both teams, I think the Bears are on a better upward trajectory. They'll be able to take this game at home. This is one of those games where the home team wins. If you guys were going to Denver, I would be voting it the other way.
yeah, no, I agree with you. Now we go into the Commanders going up against the Commanders. Again, this is kind of one of those weird teams of where they're a bad team and you expect the Bears to beat them, but you also kind of look at it and go, but like they could very easily lose. I'm going to give the Bears the win on this one because last year the Commanders came into Chicago and beat them at home in what was just a horrifically bad game. I don't think the Commanders are better this year than what they were last year. They overdrafted a bunch of guys last season. We don't
Did
know
they
what Sam
ever?
Howell is yet. And I think the Bears are going to be a little bit more of a consistent team. They're going to go into Washington. They say, you beat us at home last year. This is just us repaying the favor.
Yeah, this is going to be a sloppy game, unfortunately. I mean, it's a short week. You guys are playing Thursday night football after dealing with the Broncos. The
That's right.
only thing that you have going for you that's good is the Commanders are going to be coming off of a game against the Eagles. So they're going to be very beat up at that
Yeah.
point. Uh, I think this is going to be a low scoring affair. I think it's going to be a dull game to watch. I don't think it's going to be very exciting at all. Um, that's a tough one though, man. Because your Bears are the ones that have to travel. I think the Commanders might be able to squeak out a win against you guys here.
Yeah, fair enough. Then the week after, the Minnesota Vikings come into Chicago and play the Bears. Uh, I think the Vikings are gonna take this one just because at the moment they are just the better built team, and having Justin Jefferson and then bringing in Jordan Addison as their number two, I think it's just gonna be a little too much for the young secondary to handle. I think it's gonna be a very close game though because I think Kirk Cousins, he's going to be targeting JJ, and then he's also going to be having some success with Jordan Addison. But I just think the Vikings defense is just so overrated. And the Vikings, they love to take that shotgun and shoot their own foot off a lot of the
Mhm.
times. And it's the rivalry game too. But I think ultimately the Vikings are going to squeak out a close game.
I agree with you 100%. It's going to be a tough fought game. This is, another one of those ones in the division that's now up for grabs. You know, it it's too bad that you. When does flex time start? When do they start flexing games?
I think it's like in November.
Oh, okay. I was like, if you guys could somehow get flexed into prime time, then your Bears win easy.
Yep, because
Because
prime
we
time
know
Kirk
Kirk Cousins
Cousins.
cannot play in prime time.
Yep.
But unfortunately, yeah, I do think
He's
it'll
the
be a
king
close
of an
game.
11 o'clock game.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it's going to be close. It's going to be hard fought. We'll see the flashes of what's to come from the Bears in subsequent seasons, but they are ultimately, unfortunately, going to lose at home to the Vikings.
Yep.
On the bright side, the very next week, you guys get the Raiders coming into town for a nice, easy bounce back game.
Yeah, and I think he's gonna have this team going, listen, we just lost a tough divisional game. We have a team coming in now that is not very good. We need to go out there and beat. He's gonna have their mindset ready, and it's going, we are not gonna allow this Raiders team to come in and compete with us. I think this is gonna be arguably one of Justin Fields' best game of the season just because the Raiders, they don't have a fucking hope in hell on defense. They got Max Crosby, you got Chandler Jones, but what Chandler Jones are you getting? Are you getting the Chandler Jones of the Arizona Cardinals, or are you getting the Chandler Jones of last year with the Raiders where it was like, oh, he's getting so close, but he just can't do it?
Well, and I mean, both those guys anyway, combined, you're great as long as you keep the quarterback between the tackles. How often does Justin Fields stay between the tackles?
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. So, no, I think this is going to be probably the most dominant win of the season for your Bears as well.
I
I
don't
think
think
they're
it's
going
going to be the most dominant. That's going to be coming up a little bit later in the schedule, but I think this
to.
is going
Okay.
to be a very, very good game for the Bears. Now
Oh, you
going,
must play the Cardinals too at some point.
not the team that I'm thinking, but we do play the Cardinals, but that's not the
Okay.
game that I'm thinking.
Okay.
The next game we go into LA to face off against the Chargers, and unfortunately, this is kind of a weird game because it's a revenge game for Khalil Mack, obviously, on the Chargers, the team that traded him away, and a team that he loved playing for. Like, Khalil Mack understood the move, but he didn't want
Hmm.
to go. Justin Herbert, he has a new offensive coordinator that's actually going to be able to call games properly. And I just think it's just going to be too much for the Bears to handle at the current moment. So I think that's a loss.
I have to agree with you there. This will be a Bears loss. You're going into LA against the Chargers, who are quietly one of the better teams in the AFC. You know, they're always talked about and they always seem to falter, that they have ever since Philip Rivers played there. And this is a primetime game in LA, you know, and I mean, unfortunately, the Bears fan base doesn't travel quite as well as
Oh,
say my Steelers do.
they're one of the best traveling teams in the nation. There was a reason why the Chiefs
Yeah.
said that they didn't want to play the Bears overseas is because they wanted the traveling fans. The Bears are one of the
Hmm.
best traveling fans.
Well, overseas, yeah. I mean, I'm
No,
talking
in
more,
the entire NFL.
yeah. They're up there. They're not quite on par with the Pittsburgh Steelers
I
though.
I would have to beg to differ on that one.
Really?
Oh
I
yeah.
think the Steelers and the Cowboys are the two best traveling teams. The
Yeah.
Bears are up there, but they're not quite.
I
Not
think
quite.
I think every single Bears fan that travels
Yeah.
is gonna like you go to 49ers games and it's a Bears home game. But yeah,
Fair enough. Either way,
regardless,
yeah, we
yeah,
do agree this is a loss for the Bears.
yeah. Then this next game going into New Orleans to face off against the Saints. This is again kind of one of those weird games for the Bears where we don't really know what the Saints are gonna be because uh, obviously having Poopy Pants Derek Carr as the new quarterback, but the team hasn't been super great the last few years. What are they gonna be? I'm gonna ultimately give the Bears a loss on this game, just because it's just gonna be one of those weird games where going into New Orleans after what is going to be a hell of a battle against the Chargers. Because the one thing about Matt Eberflus is it doesn't matter which team it is, which game it is, what the rivalry, what the history is, he gets them to play hard football. And I think that the team, the Bears, they're just gonna be in this kind of mode of where after that Chargers game, they're kind of gonna be a little bit tired and a little bit kind of like, oh fuck, like it's kind of like what we talked about where I forget which team it was for you where I think it was the Raiders after they faced the Bengals where it was just kind of one of those teams that they should realistically beat but they're just kind of in this little like fuck like just that tough week the previous week. So for me that it's going to be I think it's going to be a pretty bad game to watch honestly, but that's kind of where I have it.
Fair enough. This will be a disagreement for me. I think the Bears are going to be able to go in there and pull out a win. We talked at length last week about the New Orleans Saints and the ease of schedule that their defense has this year. They're playing against so many middling or low tier quarterbacks. Justin Fields, in my opinion, is one of the top quarterbacks they're going to face this season. And I think by this point, they'll be lulled into this bit of false sense of security because I think they'll have a good record by this point. And so you'll be looking at the Saints going, oh, geez, they're the better team, only because they've gone up against quarterbacks that aren't as dynamic and capable as Justin Fields. So I think he's going to be able to go in there, surprise them. I think we'll see a big game from DJ Moore as well here. This will be one of the real shining spotlights for him. I think they'll go in there and take a win against a win from the Saints.
The following week on primetime football, the team that traded DJ Moore to the Bears for the number 1 overall pick to draft Bryce Young in the Carolina Panthers, they come to Chicago and the Bears fucking obliterate them. Like I personally believe this is going to be one of those games. If we remember the Titans versus Eagles game last year, where AJ Brown played against the Titans and he put up such a godly stats line against them. To me, this is DJ Moore going, listen, fuckers, you guys didn't get me a quarterback my entire time there. I'm with my guy. We have chemistry now. We're coming. And I think the Bears, they're going to look at this and go, I think the Bears are going to have a massive chip on their shoulder going, yeah, you traded up to get a guy that, you think is going to be all this and that. Not today. I think the Bears, this is the game to me where we were talking about beforehand. This is going to be the Bears' best game. I think they are going to get after Bryce Young and they are going to make his life a living hell. And the Bears' offense, the Panthers aren't going to be able to stop them. I think this is just going to be one of those games where the Panthers, they try to come in with the chip on their shoulder going, oh yeah, we traded our best guy. It's just going to be Justin Fields and DJ Moore going, you fucked up.
Fair. This will be an agree and disagree for me. I'm going to play that numbers again. This is a short week for both your teams. I don't think it's going to be as explosive as you're thinking. I do think the Bears are going to win this easily. I don't think it's going to be competitive at all, but I don't see them going out and putting up fantastical numbers after such a short week. And, after traveling to New Orleans to deal with the Saints in that week as well. But I do think this will be a win against the Panthers.
I genuinely believe if the Bears are going to surpass 40 points in a game, that's going to be the game. Going up against the Detroit Lions at home, I have my Chicago Bears taking a loss here. And I think it's mostly because the team is going to put so much energy and so much emotion into that Carolina Panthers game that they're going to face off against the Lions, who are going to be probably the leader of this division this particular year. And I think it's just going to be too much for them to handle, especially in Detroit.
Yeah, I don't. This is a tough one for me because, as you've talked, Eberflus is really good at prepping his guys, and you guys have 10 days off between that Panthers game. And I think because I feel like that game is going to be a lot sloppier than you're feeling, I think he's going to lock them down and go, look, we cannot play like that against the Lions. This is a division game. We're going into their home. We need to set the tone. And I think you're going to be able to go in and take a win away from the Lions in Detroit. After 10 days of prep, I think you'll be able to.
Following week, we go into Minnesota to face off against the Vikings. This is a game, again, where I think the duo of Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson are going to be really, really tough. But the key thing is, it's a primetime football game, and we know Kirk Cousins can't do fucking anything. And I think Matt Eberflus and the Bears are going to have a lot more of a chip on their shoulder heading into this game. And so I think the Bears take this one.
I agree. And purely on the fact that it is a primetime game against Kirk Cousins. That's all you need to say. And especially after, in my opinion, coming off that win against the Detroit Lions, you guys are going to have a chip on your shoulder. You're going up against a guy who struggles in primetime, and it's another divisional game. You're going to be just chomping at the bit going, oh my God, we can win back-to-back division games here. We got to do this. And I think you're going to.
Going into the third divisional game in a row against the Lions, unfortunately, I think the Bears are just going to be... I don't
They're going to be gassed.
Gassed is the right word, and it's going to be too much. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to be a closer game than what I think people are going to initially expect out of this, but I think just a third divisional game in a row. I don't know the last time that I've ever heard of a team playing 3 divisional games back to back to back, and it's just I think it's just going to be just a little bit too much. But yeah, ultimately I give that one to the Lions.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's more that this is the Lions' revenge game for losing at home to your Bears a couple weeks prior.
Yep.
And they're just coming back and going, nope, now we're taking it. Because you got to remember that previous game as well, that is Thanksgiving. And the Lions don't traditionally perform well on Thanksgiving.
That classic Family Guy meme of where Brian falls on the lion pits during Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be in Detroit losing a football game? Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, but I agree. I think the Bears will lose to the Lions at home on this one, but it will be a close, competitive game, reiterating the fact that this division is so tight this year. It's gonna come down to that last.
This is a weird game for me, and I know you're gonna be a little bit more favoring the Bears in this matchup because they're going into Cleveland to face Cleveland, but I do think the Browns are going to be better than what you expect. Again, it's kind of you need to see it. I think it's going to be another close game that ultimately the Bears lose because of their defense. I don't think it's going to be because of their offense. I think it's going to be because of their defense. And the last time that the Bears played the Browns with Justin Fields as their starting quarterback, the Browns defensive line came after Fields. They got like 8 sacks on him that day, and I think it's just going to be one of those scenarios where I think it's going to be the offense is going to be good and they're going to be able to handle the task. It's just ultimately going to be the defense that falters.
Yeah, this is another tough one for me. I'm down on the Browns within the division for sure. I've seen them play against other teams though, and they do look good. It's just they're in a division where the other three teams are just they're so much better. Both at building a team, putting a team on the field, and playing the game itself. That's why I always shit on them within my own division. Outside of the division, they do perform admirably. Like they're a middle tier team against the rest of the league. They're bottom tier against the AFC North, middle tier against the rest of the league. And yeah, I think at this point, your Bears, they've given so much this season already, pulling out some tough wins, and I think you're right. I think this will be one of those late season games for the Browns where Deshaun Watson is sort of showing flashes that he still might have it, even though they're well out of a playoff spot by this point. And yeah, I think going into Cleveland, your Bears will lose. If it was the other way around, if he's had home field advantage, I think he's would win this one.
So now the Bears come back home, this time to face off against the Cardinals. And I think the Bears are going to take this one just solely because the Cardinals are just not them. And Kyler Murray will likely be back at this point, but how much rust is he going to still be having? Is he going to be fully confident in his health, this, and that? And I just think the Bears are going to look at it and go, you know what? We had a really bad game against the Browns last week.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to allow this. This is a game that we need to win. We need to show that we can win so that the NFL, everyone can just look at us and go, okay, they beat the teams that they were supposed to beat. And they go out there and they beat. And I think they beat the Cardinals.
I agree. This will be that bounce back game after a tough loss to the Browns, where I think going in to that Browns game, Eberflus will feel as though you should win, and so this bounce back game against the Cardinals on Christmas Eve, want to give the fans a show. I think it'll be an entertaining watch, and it'll depend on the weather as well. Christmas Eve in Chicago, outdoors.
It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold, but it could also be very sloppy and snowy.
Yep.
And so we'll see. If the field is clear, then I think the Bears will be able to run up the score a little bit against this Cardinals team as well. If it's a snowy game, then we're going to see a lot more Khalil Herbert dominating the Cardinals.
Yeah, and so the next game, the Atlanta Falcons come in kind of what I am going to say is going to be almost like a trap game for the Bears, because this is one of those ones where it's going to be the Bears should go out and win this game. But unfortunately, I think the Falcons, they're not going to be bad per se. They're not going to be great, but they're going to kind of be one of those teams where they're just going to kind of walk into Chicago and just surprise the Bears in this instance, because the Bears, they're going to be looking at next week at the Green Bay
Mhm.
Packers having to go into they're going to have to go into Packers Stadium and just have to worry. And I think the Bears are going to be too focused on Green Bay as opposed to worrying about the Falcons, and I think they end up falling.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked a bit about the Falcons team last year when we were or last week when we were talking about the Saints. This is one of those teams that by the end of the season, I think they're going to be substantially better than they are in week one. This Falcons
And
team.
that's typically what they like to do anyways, is that they're a better team at the end of the year than what they start out with.
Yeah. And that's just because they haven't really had a solid team carry over from year to year yet. And so it takes time to build that team up, you know? And so I think you're right. I think the Falcons are going to come in and unfortunately surprise the Bears and squeak out a win. I think it'll be close, but again, yeah, your Bears are going to be looking ahead to those Packers, especially depending on how the standings look within your division, because we talked about it, and I still think unless the Vikings can run away with it, this division is going to be very tight and could come down to the final week to decide who wins the division.
Yeah. So final game of the year, the Bears go into Green Bay, and I think very similar to week 1, I think the Bears are going to take this one in what is on a very very emotional battle. And it's going to be Justin Fields saying, "You couldn't beat us at home. Now it's our turn to come into your stadium and beat you." Because he hasn't won at Lambeau yet. And he needs. This is going to be one of those games where I don't necessarily think playoffs are going to be on the line for this one. I think the Bears are just going to be walking out there. And I kind of almost have this feeling of like last year where the Packers, they're a team where last week they kind of need a little bit something more. Maybe not necessarily this year, but it's going to be the Bears saying, we need to beat the Packers at home. We need to show us, not only the fans, but ourselves, that we can go in there and get it done. And I think Fields, he goes out there with that same mentality that he had week 1, and he says, listen, I'm going to go out there and just put on a show.
See, and I don't know if they're quite ready to be able to pull out a win in Lambeau. And especially being the last week of the season, after having the whole year for this Jordan Love Green Bay Packers team to build up and start to act more as a team, and maybe we see more of what Jordan Love is. If Jordan Love is able to show he is a, decent caliber quarterback and deserves a starting role, then I think he's going to be able to defend home turf, because I think he's going to be playing the role of spoiler. And, ultimately good. They'll be the ones going in there going, game means nothing to us other than bragging rights that, hey, we can still beat the Bears at home. And I think they will manage to pull out a win against the Bears in the final week, which will end any chance of playoffs for your Bears.
So at the end of this, you have my Bears sitting at a 10-7 record, and I have my Bears rated the exact same record that I had your team at 9-8.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting season to say the less, but we're getting close to 2 hours and 15 minutes, so I think it's probably time to say our farewells and continue to look forward to some more football here a little bit later today, some preseason week 2 action. And thank you all for hanging out with us here today. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed all of our content. If you can't watch the YouTube video, but you still want to listen in, we are on Spotify, so I'll make sure to link that down in the description. But thanks for hanging out with us again. Brendon Sterling on the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us.